Hey everyone, so I thought it'd be good to look at a real basic introduction to Fusion, just in case anyone's never opened it before. It wasn't a requirement of you taking the course to have done advanced CAD, and to my knowledge, Fusion wasn't covered at all in first year. I know I've taught some of you using SolidWorks. Fortunately, a lot of the same processes are very similar, and it uses a lot of the same terminology. When we launch Fusion, we'll get a blank screen and a list of projects on the side. Fusion's all online and cloud-based, which has its benefits, it has its problems, but we just work with that. It does allow for really good project management and sharing of a project with other people, which is going to be excellent for what we're looking at throughout our studio. So what you'll do is go new project, type in Droid Studio, or whatever you want to call it. I've already made it, so I can go in here. And what you can do is go across to people, invite some people. So whoever's your group member, you can invite them to the group. There's other ways of doing this, and you can create teams as well, where you can swap through. Later I'll go into that, so you can swap through and work collaboratively. But for right now, all you need to do is create a project, share it with your group member, so that way all your CAD files are all going to be in the same spot, and you can both work on the same assemblies together, or even the same parts together. Your tool space up here should come up very similar to mine, if not the same. I have played around with it a little bit by modifying some of these shortcuts, but what you really need to know is it used to be a lot different, and now it's been changed to work towards more of a SolidWorks type layout. One important thing to make sure you have is down the bottom of this. This is what's called the timeline, and it's much like the feature list in SolidWorks, where you can roll backwards and roll forwards between features. You have the option of turning this off, so it's called design history. If you turn this off, it goes to a direct modeling workflow, which is similar to programs like Rhino. I don't see the benefit of ever doing that. So anytime you open up a project, sometimes when you import a file, it'll start without this, and you just want to make sure this is always here. So if it isn't there, just right click the project and make sure you're capturing your design history. And what you want to do, as soon as you even start, just save it as whatever it's going to be. So I'm just going to save this as an introduction, and you'll see that it saves up onto the side over here. The reason it has to load is because it's uploading the basic file to Autodesk or 360 or A360, whatever they're calling it. And every time you save, it gives you a version. So if I do something on this, like create a sketch and just make a square and go finish and save, when that updates, whenever it does update, it's going to give us, we have two different versions. So this is really good for having backups of your work. So make sure you save often. There's no problem with having heaps of these and saving very often as you go. And looking down here, we can see that our sketch has been added to the design history, and we can roll back and forward to create and get rid of it. You also have the option of sharing a public link, so you can give someone access to this. Obvious basic rename, move, inserting to new designs, all that kind of stuff. So there's really good sort of file sharing and integration. Similar again to SolidWorks is how the tools are laid out. So we have Solid, and in SolidWorks this is with your boss features, so your boss extrudes, cuts, revolves, and all of that. For some reason mine keeps glitching up when I have my recording software on. It should be coming from the top, obviously, but it's starting down here. Doesn't really make a difference, it's just weird. You come across the surface, and then pardon me, everything comes in as a surface. So we have surface extrude, surface revolves, all that. And then we've got modify, which allows us to trim, extend, stitch, unstitch. So again, much like SolidWorks surfacing, if you did get into that in first year at all. We have assembly features. We're not going to look at them just now. Basic inspection stuff. Creating planes is kind of weird. I don't think it does it as well as SolidWorks, just because you have to specify the type of plane you want originally. It just takes a bit more thought. And it has really good ways of just inserting a canvas or an SVG or a DXF. So inserting a canvas is when we draw a sketch, we scan it, and we want to insert it. So, you know, just for example, if I just go whatever's on my desktop from some stuff I've been looking at in Advanced CAD with my students there, you can select it, put it there, come over to your canvas, right click, calibrate, and you know, we can actually set some sizes based on this. So I mean, this says from here to here is 50, so what we can do is click from here to here and punch in 50, assuming that's millimeters, and then, you know, now this is scaled at the right size. So some really good stuff to do, like if you're sketching it 1:1 on an A3 piece of paper, then just measure a distance and you can calibrate it to the screen really easily. So that'll be really good. I'm just going to delete that again. When it comes to sketching, which is obviously where we generally start in most CAD, we'll hit sketch, and depending on where we are, we get a view here. Quick tip, if you hold in shift and hold in the middle mouse button, that's how you rotate the camera. Scrolling in and out is the same. Holding the middle mouse on its own pans the design around, so it's a bit different from SolidWorks, but it's much more similar to other Autodesk products. So then, yeah, like SolidWorks or other CAD, you need to select a plane to sketch on. So we select the front plane, and we've got pretty much all the same tools: lines, rectangles, circles, arcs. It's all the same. We'll find that it does give us these straight up options for inputs as well. So if I type in 100, press tab and press 120, it brings it 100 mil at 120, and well, apparently not. 100 mil, tab 120, enter, and it automatically defines it. That can be useful. I generally don't do it that much, but it is what it is. Trying to move things around manually in a sketch, like SolidWorks, it is a bit wonky at times, so everything should be controlled properly by dimensions. Again, if you need to use dimensions, which you should always use, press the D key or hit sketch dimensions. One of the things I have noticed with Fusion a lot is if you're drawing something horizontal and then come in vertical, what it does is it adds a perpendicular relationship instead of just making, like even here, it's made this line perpendicular to this line over here, when in reality what we really want is just a vertical line. So much like SolidWorks, these little icons tell us what our relations are. So we can delete that, click it, and horizontal and vertical are one relation now. So depending on the angle of your piece, if it's like there, it'll go horizontal. But like say we have it here and we want it to be horizontal or vertical, clicking it to do one will make it vertical, but if it is below that angle, it'll go horizontal. You can make your own opinions whether you like that or not. I'm not too big of a fan. I would rather have one for each. And like the newer versions of SolidWorks, when you make a sealed section, it gives you this profile. To do construction lines, we have this option here. So we draw our regular geometry, select it, and click construction. That turns it into a construction line. Sketch grid can be turned on or off. Profile is what I was talking about with this little area here. So we turn that on and off, and you can't select the inside profile. That depends on pretty much your own preferences. There is an option for 3D sketches. I would always have that turned off because Fusion has some really weird 3D sketching that I'm not a huge fan of. And I wouldn't recommend it until we get into more advanced stuff. So let's say we just make a circle that's 100 in diameter. We hit finish sketch, and obviously there's more constraints under here, but all the constraints are very similar. The only new one here really is curvature, and you wouldn't really do that in a sketch anyway. Anything with curvature is generally just a fillet or a surface, and you would just ensure that is there when using the feature. So we have this. We can use this little thing up here to rotate through the views. So we can come to the right view, go to the back, go to 3/4 views, whatever we want. That's pretty great. And when it comes to extruding, we don't have an option of a cut extrude or a boss extrude. It's all in one. So it already selects it because that's pretty much the only thing that's there. We get similar options to SolidWorks, distance, do we go up to an object? Do we go through all? Are we coming symmetrically? Are we starting at the plane or at an object? The distance, and here it's got what's called the taper angle. You might recognize this as a draft angle. So you've got 5 or -5 for a negative draft. It's all the same sort of thing. And we've got the option of making a new body. Now this is where it starts to get interesting. This operation is where you select whether you want it to be a cut or a join or a new body or an intersection or whatever. Generally we go join, cut, or new body. Intersection, we don't use it that much. So just by going new body, we're going to just make that 100 again and go OK. And what I'll do is, offset planes work perfectly fine from surfaces, and you can just drag them out, so it's really easy sometimes. Let's just go 50. And on this, we click sketch. It does the same sort of thing. It pulls you to the view. It can be a bit tricky. Like right now, I want to draw my line starting from this edge of the circle, but it doesn't, because for some reason, but however they decided, Autodesk wanted it, you have to select the object and project the geometry to it. You can't really reference bodies very well. You have to have it as a sketch, at least to make things consistent. So what we have to do for that is go project, and that's going to project the body, the edges, whatever you want onto the current sketch. So by selecting that, it makes a link, so if it changes, it does it. And we go OK. It's brought in these two lines here. So it's much like using convert entities, but it's a little bit more strict, and you can turn it to construction lines. Now, if I delete it, it's really easy just to go and press the P key on your keyboard and just go OK, and it's right there. So it's not the biggest deal. And now when we move our mouse, it comes up with that snapping option to just grab that. So that can be really good. And then we can come in, make sure nothing's selected when you pick the coincident, and make it coincident. We can make it vertical by adding in, clicking vertical and then selecting that. So what we can do, we can see that it's highlighting these profiles. So we don't have to exit our sketch. We can just leave it sketching, hit extrude. And now when we select a profile, we get the option to just drag it out. Now look how, when it drags out this far, it's fine. And as soon as it hits another existing piece of geometry, it wants to cut through it. So it changes to red. That means it's going to do a cut command, and we see the operation change. New body, cut. So by hitting OK on that, it obviously cuts all the way through it. And does that as an operation. Otherwise, we can swap it to join, which, like we do in SolidWorks, the feature in join, or feature similar to that, is that one button that's called merge result. And that means it's stuck as one body. If we open up our bodies on the side, we can see that body one is just one body. Or we could change it to new body as well. And what that's going to do is create a second body in place in case you didn't want to remove anything from this and you just wanted to make something new in that spot. So let's go back and join it. So it's really easy to just go through here and adjust it, much like SolidWorks, but I think down the bottom is pretty easy too. We have this option of press pull. So this is where we actually start to get into some of the benefits of Fusion. Press pull allows us to just kind of mess with the shapes as they are. So if we select this and bring it across, it already knows that what we're trying to do is bring it around this curvature, because it's really quite great. So if we want to nudge something out of the way or bring it a little closer, that'll work really well. Especially, you know, if we're talking about droids and speculative design, we might want to just see how things look. Again, press pull on this surface. What it's going to do is radiate that outwards, but it doesn't, you know, you might think it might have kept that line. Sometimes it's not always perfect, and it really depends on what you want. So right now, what it's doing is just changing the radius of this rear part of it and making everything update around it. So it can get pretty complicated and might not always do what you want. Like, I'm not sure what this will do at this point. So at this point now, it's just extruding it, right? It's not, it is kind of following the edge as well, but it's working on a different radius. And then when you get to here, it decides it has to extend this all the way out. So it's definitely not the smartest way to go about modeling, but it does have some really good benefits. Like if we change that to a cut and want to try and like push this surface in, you know, we can change how much of that's cut out if we're looking at getting a certain amount of airflow through here or whatever it might be. We can even use it to extend things or shorten it right down. So it is really cool. It's probably the coolest thing in Fusion, I reckon. And you can use it for really easily making holes bigger and smaller. So if I go back to this and just put a circle by pressing C, and I'm just going to press D for dimension, change that to about 40, solid extrude, select that all the way through. It can be really good if it's 40, you can just click it and, you know, we can go -5, right? And if we inspect it, you know, we can see that the radius is 25 now. So it's increased the radius by 5. So there's a really good way of like just quickly adjusting stuff. Not always the best option. Ideally, you would know exactly what you want before you start modeling it, but it's an option nonetheless. Other things to know is that press pull works on edges as well. So for edges, what it does is it just straight opens the fillet command. Fillets are really forgiving in Fusion. So like right here, this is standard, 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 and then at this point, SolidWorks would freak out. In Fusion, it actually adjusts the way the fillet works. So it'll go past the edge of the surface, up to a point, obviously, and it's really generous on its fillets. So that's good and bad. I mean, generally we want to do fillets right at the end when we're just dressing stuff up and going for a certain look. And what you can do is just punch in, say we want 1 mil on that, and then we want to do a different kind of fillet. When we go add selection, we can pick this back face, and we can make this, you know, 5, right? And what that does is it allows us to have 2 different kinds of fillets in the one feature, which is super useful because otherwise, or a lot of the time, you end up with, yes, good modeling, good modeling, good modeling, fillet, 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 and it starts to get a bit complicated and annoying. So we want to do all we can to clean up our feature tree. And again, even though we've got these fillets on, we can, let me exit that, press the wrong button. If I press pull, I can click that and drag it out even more or bring it in, and it keeps all the fillets on there, so it is really powerful. So always keep that in mind. If you need to do a small adjustment, you might not have to remodel everything. Surfacing is much the same, except it has some really good options for actually trimming, but sometimes they go a bit wonky. That's kind of nothing new anyway. Alright, so I clicked that face and deleted it. Let's have a look at just doing a basic trim of a surface. So we need a sketch. We can create a fit point spline. Splines in Fusion tend to look a bit better and behave a bit better than our ones in SolidWorks, which go a bit crazy, a bit easily. Although adjusting the edges can be a bit not as fun. Anyway, so once we do that, we come across to trim, which is the snips. And when we've got our trim tool selected, it looks normal, but as soon as we rotate it, we can see where it intersects the model. And this is one of the benefits of Fusion, where it's really cool. It actually shows everywhere it cuts. And when you select it, it goes ahead and cuts all that out. Another thing to note, like I'm just kind of going through a bunch of stuff I think is relevant. You may be getting lost, but if something seems like, you know, it might make sense or you might need some more help on it, tell me in class so we can go through some more. And I think you can even something like this, right? You could go through and press pull on that. Okay, so it doesn't like that. So ideally you'd be able to increase or decrease the fillet, but it didn't like that, so that's fine. One thing to note is we have a yellow side of this surface and a silver side. What that means is this is the A side or the good side, and the yellow is the B side or the inside generally when it comes to modeling stuff. Obviously this is a very weird model where it doesn't really matter, but if your work is for some reason inside out, what you have to do is go into surface and you want to reverse normal. So when I say A and B, it means the normal side or the non-normal side. And that's just to do with the way that surface are calculated. Like normal to the surface is 90 degrees off it. And so when we click that and go OK, it just flips them. So if you're getting stuck with this yellow color where you don't want it, it might be that your surface is inside out essentially. The other really incredible thing about Fusion is creating forms. So this is called Tspline modeling. And it's where it starts to get really crazy, and you can just start to make shapes that are really organic and advanced at the same time. You can control them really well, but you can go and pull out some really cool 3D shapes and get some really interesting surface geometry going on. I think I showed you some of this briefly, but you can go through and crease edges to make sharp contours, and we'll be doing this when we get into like some advanced surfacing techniques for our droids, because we want them to look as cool as possible. But even, you know, just modeling up something like that has that clean sort of producty edge to it with the round smooth elements on the other side. So what I'm trying to get at with this is there's a lot of new stuff in Fusion compared to what we may be familiar with SolidWorks. Like, you know, the way these T-spline elements work is it's a bunch of boxes that are then smoothed out. And you can play around with this by going to the utilities, by just bringing in stuff and playing around with it. I cycle through them by using the Alt keys. So yeah, I'm going through a heap of things right now, but the idea is that if you don't know, if you haven't used Fusion, play with it. Play around. We're not going to be at an advanced CAD level for everyone, which is absolutely fine, but we're going to be able to spend a bit of time on between two people making sure we've got a really good model. So I am expecting some pretty good CAD stuff to actually come out of this. I think I'm pretty capable of teaching you the skills you'll need to know. But that's going to require us to have some really good communication, and you're going to have to tell me what you need to model up if you're having trouble with it or whatever it might be. Because, you know, not everything's like just straight pulling things out of a shape and hoping they look really awesome. It's about making sketches, importing them, modeling over them really effectively. But, you know, once we hit finish, it brings it back into the normal workspace as a body. So it can be this type of design tools can be really good if you model up something really basic and then go about putting an advanced form over it. So, you know, we can grab that, fillet it with a small fillet, and we get some really clean elements to it. After we're really happy with what we're done, we go over to render, and we can render over, you know, you get like the nice highlights, you get the smooth transitions. So it's going to be real capable. We're going to be really capable of getting some really good quality work out. There are animations in here, but like we'll probably be going to VRED for animations and rendering anyway. But getting them to a little bit of quality in Fusion is good, because then we'll know if it's going to look good in VRED, because we will see if there's weird surfaces or things that need to be adjusted or whatever. I've spent a lot of time doing this freeform modeling stuff before, so don't expect to just come in and make amazing things. Not that this is very amazing, it's just a bunch of weird shapes. But modeling up, you know, like we've seen elements of Spot, the robot, that has all these nice cool contours to it. It's definitely capable. We're definitely capable of making shapes like that. If we're looking at making really sort of rigid shapes, we can do that as well in freeform, with like a simple plane and using creased edges. So what you do is just bring out the form, and you can just, you know, drag it out nice and smooth or drag it out sharp. And so it's not just for super neat organic stuff. You can use it for rigid modeling too, and then come and break up some of this as well by using freeform bevels and things like that, which if we go to 0.1 and then like uncrease everything, it should be nice and smooth. Should be, but it doesn't always like playing nice. There we go. And we got to select the one on this side. Yeah, so, you know, even sharp shapes like that have softer contours to them as well. So if we're going to try and make our stuff look super spacey, we'll probably find that, you know, even we can just finish it and then bring it out to fill it. Like that, and we can play around with making, you know, like last week we spoke of creating a design style, and a lot of that's going to be around form generation and ideation. How do we make it look unique? How do we make it look interesting and still like a product with its own design style? So, you know, you throw all that kooky surfacing together, you blend it out, you fillet it, and we're going to get some really cool designs. So maybe we'll play around in class, which is tomorrow, and look at more things. Right now it's just play around with the Fusion workspace if you haven't. You know, don't try and essentially make anything, just look at it, have a look through the menus, see how it's pretty familiar to what you've used before with SolidWorks. Share your project with your partner. Yeah, and just don't be afraid of it, right? It's something new, but it's not too complicated, and I think you're all very capable, so we should be fine. Because, yeah, we're going to be able to do some really cool things, and then, you know, advanced stuff that would be pretty hard to try and do in SolidWorks. SolidWorks definitely has its limitations, whereas Fusion has a lot more options for creating weird and interesting stuff. you can do pretty much anything SolidWorks can for the regular stuff, but for being unique and coming up with interesting designs, I feel that working in Fusion will be really beneficial. Like even then, that's still trying to like push it out, which is pretty incredible because it's such a complex surface. Although it does like to crash a lot, so keep an eye out for that. So I should have been saving more often. Not that this is amazing and worth keeping, but I'm sure you understand the pros of saving often. And, you know, even when you do save, you can jot down some notes of what you change so you and your partner both know exactly what's going on. Yeah, so have a look through Fusion, some of the menus and stuff. There is heaps to it. Generative design, we're going to avoid that. Manufacturing, we'll avoid that. Simulation, we'll avoid that. Drawing, we may avoid that. Animation, we might look at. Rendering, we'll definitely look at. So yeah, go through the menus, see if there's anything that interests you that you haven't used before. Try it out, see what it does. Play around with just generating some T-splines and see what comes up. Yeah, so anyway, that's just a short introduction, although it's gone on for a little bit of time now. Yeah, so thanks for watching. See you all in class tomorrow.